Alright, next thing going in, gonna be the pilot bearing right here. And what I did with that is I put it in the freezer overnight so that it shrinks down a little bit. I think that's a pretty commonly known mechanics hack. Also, I have this 22mm impact socket that fits right in there to help me seat it properly. Looks like it's symmetric about the axes, so it shouldn't matter which way this goes in. And there you can hear the change in noise, so it's seated properly. Alright, so next we got the flywheel going in. 8 bolts with that, and there is this one locating pin right here. So you just want to make sure you line that up. Looks like I go good with the flywheel. I am going to be reusing the old bolts, even though it says not to, because as I mentioned previously, this transmission is going to be coming out again, and potentially for a like a solid flywheel conversion. So I'm gonna go ahead and just reuse, even though I have the new ones on hand. I'm gonna save it for that job because I may or may not mention I'm going forced induction after this, so it's gonna need a heavier clutch anyway. So just this is for temporarily get me by. It looks like the rear main seal is good too. There's not any indication of oil leakage around that, so that's comforting. So I'm going to move a little past where my face is. I don't want this thing falling off onto my face. Alright. Because it does weigh quite a bit. I did measure or weigh this whole clutch pack system, and it weighs about 38 pounds with the clutch attached. Alright, so you'll see one of these holes is bigger than the other. It's this one here, so just gotta make sure that goes over that guide. I mean, it shouldn't fit any other way. Just get a couple of these started so they don't fall on your head. Alright. It looks like on this side of the flywheel it also indicates where that larger hole is. There's 2 little notches here, and you don't see that anywhere else around there, so that's indication of where that alignment feature is. While I'm doing this, I did try to play nice with the automatic transmission oil cooler lines, but it doesn't appear that you can get those out without lowering the steering rack and or the sway bar, so I opted for the Sawzall removal. Alright, the size socket you'll need for this, 19mm. And the specified torque for these is 100 Newton meters. So once I get this seated, I'm going to try my hand at a tool to hold the position of this flywheel in place while it gets torqued down. Otherwise it could rotate on you. They do make special tools for that just mount right to the engine side here and just have some teeth that engage the flywheel to hold it steady. But I've got an idea for something I just have laying around. We'll see if that works. I just don't know if the bolts are long enough. Alright, so it's going to be more rotating that way when I go to torque it. So what I've got is this fan clutch wrench, and that appears like it's going to fit across here. Maybe in a way that I can secure it, and it'll keep it from rotating around. A little bit longer that way. Alright, so that'll engage. The bottom side of the firewall there, and that should keep it from rotating around that way while I torque this down. And this was, I believe, 106 Newton meters if I hadn't said it already. Alright, that's all of them. Alright, so the next step here is going to be the clutch pack. So it's with the friction disc and then the pressure plate on top of that. It has locating holes, and those have receiving holes on the pressure plate side. And then for the clutch disc, you'll want a centering tool to help keep that in place while you put the pressure plate on. So I'm hoping that I can use that 22 millimeter with a socket on it to help center that, because I couldn't find a tool this morning. It's something that typically comes with the clutch kit if you do it. I had intentions of 3D printing one, but just never got to it. So that's where we're at now. Alright, so now we've got the actual clutch, friction disc, and then the pressure plate. As I mentioned, you need a centering tool to help hold that clutch disc in place when you bolt the pressure plate down over it. So I didn't have one. I made this makeshift tool here. So what I've got is a 10 millimeter socket, and this may be different depending on what kind of sockets that you have. So I've got 10 millimeter socket with a 1/4 inch extension going through, what is this, a 5/8, and then I put tape around the shaft of the 1/4 inch extension till there was no play in it, because you're trying to center everything up. So there is a little bit of play now in the input shaft of the transmission, so it can wiggle around a little bit, but not much. So this 10 millimeter fits semi-snugly into the pilot bearing, and then this 5/8 drive fits through the clutch friction disc, so that'll hopefully keep it somewhat centered here when I get that all put together. Alright, so for the friction disc, there is a specific orientation of this. Looking at a side view of this, you'll see a shoulder side, or a larger shoulder on one side versus the other, and then the profile of the center section slightly convex to one side. So you want the long end or the larger shoulder going towards the flywheel. Alright, got everything started. You can see the friction disc still moves around a little bit in place. So now as I start to cinch down these bolts, they're going to draw the pressure plate down on top of that friction plate. So this is where you want to make sure that it's actually aligned with the flywheel. Alright, went around and checked all those torques and we're all good to go now. Now it's ready to receive the transmission. However, before I do that, I am going to go ahead and connect this clutch line here before we lose this access point. Now there are still going to be some sensors here. Looks like we just need to keep one of these. This is the one line for the O2 sensor. The other two lines for the automatic transmission, I'm probably just gonna wrap those up in the engine compartment here and just kind of keep them out of the way, because I don't intend on removing the harness portion of the automatic transmission. So we'll just put those in a bag, zip tie them, and tuck them up away from the heat. Alright, that being said, looks like it's 17 millimeter If that fits all the way over that'd be sweet. All right. All right, getting prepped to put the trans in. I've got the slave cylinder, clutch slave cylinder, that is pre-installed. We've got the throwout bearing that's greased on both of these ears. We've got the shaft lightly greased, the pin lightly greased, and same on this side of the throwout lever. So you want to be light on this grease, because if you over saturate it in grease, this is going to be spinning pretty fast, and that'll fling it to the outside and potentially get it on your friction disc, which you don't want on your friction disc. Another thing I learned along the way, there is on the back here, this is where the shift lever attaches. There is a bushing that goes on that, which I'm replacing. And when I was looking at all these refurbished parts, here's what came off of it. And I came across this yellow sponge looking thing just by itself on a couple of websites, and I had no idea where it goes, but now I can see it goes just inside of that cavity there where the shift mechanism attaches on the back side like this. And you can see there's quite a bit of play in that, and that sponge right there is what is going to absorb some of that. This is the one that came off the transmission that I'm putting into the car. As you can see in there, there is no sponge left. It is completely deteriorated. Looks like it may have got greasy or something in there, and that probably broke down the fibers of that material. So going forward, I'm not going to put anything as far as lubricant in there. I'm just going to put it in as is. Alright, we'll get that on, and then we'll get the transmission slid up underneath the car, and then I'll get it on that transmission lift jack that I have, and that'll set it up into place. Alright, fast forwarding through the struggle of a one-person install of a transmission. A few things I had happen. The throwout bearing slid off the front, so make sure you keep an eye on that. I did have the two locating sleeves fall out, and don't forget the dust shield. I also tipped the engine back by jacking up on the front side of it with a piece of wood in between, so there's no metal to metal contact there, and that helped to orient the engine downward. And then I just had to cock the transmission back. I also installed there's Torx settings for all those fasteners. The M12's got 72 Newton meters, the M10's got 43 Newton meters, and then the M8's got 23 Newton meters. And we're now up to the rear transmission crossmember, and that also gets 23 Newton meters. So with that, I did transfer this bracket over that holds the, what was that? I think that might have been the O2 sensor cabling. I put the new rubber isolators on for the transmission crossmember, and then this is the manual specific transmission crossmember. And there are two extra holes forward of where the automatic one bolted down to, so all the provisions are there, nothing to drill or tap or anything like that. These are 13mm again. Alright, now we are ready. Let's see. Yeah, we're ready to get the shift linkage in there. Ooh, it's gonna be a tight fit. I actually may have to loosen this cross member again just to get access to where that linkage connects. It's kind of tight. I'm not sure I'll be able to get in there with this sound deadening on there. So for now, let's leave the jack in place. Might as well go ahead and do that. I can already see that being an issue. Here's the pigtail for that reverse light, and I'm definitely gonna have to extend that. It's about probably about 4 inches, 6 inches short. All right, so onto the shifter. That should be enough. All right, so I'm gonna come clean here. I did forget to get this, man, the lighting here sucks. The bushing that carries the rear side of the shifter linkage. Apparently, I remember holding one in my hand, but it must have been the one I had at the salvage yard, so I don't have that right now. So I can't really even put the shift linkage in because I ordered that, and now I've got the front bushing coming too, so I won't even be able to install that just yet because I'd have to take it out again. So here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna continue forward. We'll go ahead and get the transmission drive shaft in here, and then I will also get the front section of the exhaust where it attaches to the manifolds, and then that'll let me get that X member back on the front side and maybe even this rear dust shield. So I can get a few more things done here while we wait for parts, and if that doesn't take the rest of the day, we can move on to bleeding the hydraulic lines. Still have to extend this cable for all right, somewhat in there. So you don't want to cinch down this locking collar in the center section until you have it bolted down in the vehicle, because that's going to change the length here. And I'm going to connect the front of the guibo here, but I'm still not going to cinch that down, because when I jack the rest of that up, when I put the cross member back in its place, that could also change its length just ever so slightly. So for now, we're just going to attach both ends. We'll cinch up the center support bearing, and then we'll leave that collar for later after the shifter install. So with that being said, now that I think of it, I won't be able to put that dust shield on here because that'll cover that up. So we can get drive shaft, we can get front section of exhaust and the cross member up front. We'll finish up the pigtail and then move on to coating the car, since that's something I can do already. Right here, so here's the torque values we're looking at for the drive shaft install. Here is center shaft mount to the body, so that's that center support carrier. Clamping sleeve, that's that slip sleeve in the middle. Drive shaft with U-joint, M10 ribbed or compression nut. I got the rib, so I went with 80 Newton meters. Flex disc to drive shaft, there's either M10s or M12s, and then there's two different grades of each. So it'll say that on the head of the bolt. I have M12s that are 10.9 grade, so I'm getting 100 Newton meters on those. Alright, so after the tube was installed, we did a bleed procedure. It recommends to use a pressure bleeder in the manual. I got this one a while ago. I've used it a couple times, and it's absolutely great. I don't know if you've bled brakes with like the push and hold and release and all that stuff. A two-man job, you can do this one man, no problem. Very clean, and basically you just cycle the clutch a bunch and loosen the bleeder screw on the bottom there, and you can see that catch can I have down there. Run a bunch through till you don't get any more bubbles, and then tighten that up. And then the only other note of caution, because I did it on the back of the master cylinder where the tube comes in that goes down to the slave. Don't forget to put that little clip in. It popped right out when I applied the first pressure, so Made a little bit of a mess inside on the carpet, but not to worry. We'll get through this. Anyway, I've used this Schwab one now. I've done brakes on my Volkswagen with it. Came with this European adapter cap, but I also bought this universal one here. Pretty much goes on any sort of cap you have and just kind of wraps around and cinches down and creates a seal that way. I've used that on my mom's Ford Explorer, and that worked well. All right. Alright, so still waiting on the shifter bushings. Should be here tomorrow. Meantime, we're going to get the front section of the exhaust put back on so I can put the X-brace on. And then, yeah, I kind of got to wait for the shifter from there because I can't put the rear dust shield just back together yet. So we'll move on to the coating of the vehicle. So I got, like I said, I got new gaskets we'll be putting in. I'm going to be reusing the bolts. I'm going to try and get at least one on the front here so I can prop up the back side and kind of support it before I go putting the rest on here. So now we're going to move forward and get this X brace on. Wide part to the back. Put all the bolts back into where I took them out, just so I don't lose them. Alright. So this connects this front subframe to the main rails that run back down through the center portion of the vehicle. And this X brace on these Roadsters is meant to improve the rigidity of the whole system, because you don't have the structural portion that fits through on the roof lines. Wow, taking a little slow today. All right. No, I didn't change the jack points or anything like that, so this should fit right up the way it was. Alright, so here we got the manual shift linkage as it goes in. Looks like the shift rod is going to be to the driver's side. The little indent on the top of this rear bushing is straight up. And that attaches to the back side of the axis hole. The little bend in the shifter goes to the rear. And then, yeah, boot. So since I already have the drive shaft in, here's what I'm going to do. I don't think I have enough room to get it fully assembled back in there. So what we're going to do is go underneath. We'll install this rear bushing. And then we'll bring this carrier in, insert that, attach this to the back side of the transmission. And then from the top side, I'll bring the shift lever down. I have a new carrier for that. That'll insert down inside of there, and it's got alignment clips. And then from there, I'll go back underneath. This will attach to the shifter and then to the back side of the transmission. That should complete everything. And then we'll just slip the boot on over that and continue on. Alright. Not sure how well that can be seen. Right up here is where we gotta install everything. So now I gotta loosen the cross member bolts again to bring that down. Give me access to the top side of the transmission here, where I need to install the front of that shifter linkage, and then the rear support is right here. Oh, look at there. Reverse, second, third, fourth, and fifth. Feels pretty good. Alright, so the issue I was having underneath was that on the front side of this shifter linkage, right here where it goes into the back side of the transmission gear shift selector knob, I had this washer on here, and what was happening is when I was pressing that into that bushing on the back of the transmission, it wasn't coming through far enough for the clip. And I observed this side to make sure that it was completely inserted, and it was. So now that I took that off, I was able to get the clip on, and then the other side was just fine at the bottom of this shift lever. So we're all good to go there, and I just need to button up the dust shield or the heat shield, and then the back side of the exhaust.